You guys see Bitcoin over here? Well, Bitcoin has been on fire recently. And the question on everyone's lips right now is that fire about to go out? And in today's video, we're going to be jumping down into some on-chain analytics to help give an answer to that question. Let's roll the intro and get right down into it. Hi guys, welcome back to another walk and talk video where I grab the camera, get away from the desk and share my insights into the crypto space. And today we are going to be talking about Bitcoin. Bitcoin has seen a real good run to the upside over the last few weeks, and well, is it really sustainable to keep on moving to the upside? If you're new to the channel, this might be a question that you're really looking for the answer for. And if you are a veteran of the CC channel, then you know my thoughts and opinions on this already. But we can dive down into the on-chain world and take a look at those analytics and give our thoughts and opinions with data to back it up. So with Bitcoin pushing up towards $44,000, $45,000, everyone is really hyped for Bitcoin to reach new all-time highs. We can see that there's a lot of hype around, Bitcoin spot ETFs, and whereas I do think they are coming, they're not necessarily going to be instantaneous, and we're not going to see billions of dollars flowing straight into Bitcoin overnight. And of course, we've got the Bitcoin halving event as well. Again, another event on everyone's calendar right now where we can see the FOMO and the hype train kind of getting ready to leave the station. Of course, these two things are very important that we understand what they mean, what they represent, and whether or not this is going to be a big sell the news event on both occasions. So let's start with the Bitcoin spot ETFs before we jump into on-chain data. So, Bitcoin spot ETF is a very interesting product that is being offered by many hedge funds and asset managers around the world. Ultimately, we can see some of the real big players, such as BlackRock, filing their applications for Bitcoin spot ETFs. Now, these for the most part have been delayed quite aggressively during 2023, being pushed over into early 2024. None of this is new news, of course, but it is very interesting because as we approach January, everyone is on the edge of their seats, getting really excited for a Bitcoin spot ETF to be approved. And I want to kind of stress here a little bit, guys, as to whether or not we think an approval is going to be positive or negative for price action. On one hand, you have the bulls who will tell you that, yep, absolutely, categorically, a Bitcoin spot ETF is going to see billions of dollars flowing into Bitcoin, and it's going to basically take Bitcoin to new all-time highs. On the other hand, you have more realistic approaches or more bearish thoughts, which is that although we have seen some pretty decent price action at the moment, just because a Bitcoin spot ETF is approved doesn't necessarily mean the product is actually ready to launch just yet. In fact, on this channel, I've been speaking about how Bitcoin spot ETFs are more than likely going to be 3 to 6 months out from the approval. So get approved in January, expect a Bitcoin spot ETF somewhere between March and June. And that means that, well, approval could potentially be a sell the news event, meaning that although positive news, we might actually see a lot of retail investors and investors who were early enough onto the train basically departing, liquidating their assets, and as such you see a big move to the downside. Now, that's obviously not what retail investors want to hear. They got in early, right? They don't want to see the price go back down to where they bought it, maybe even lower. No, it has to go up, right? And so, if we just kind of reflect on what is the most logical thing that's going to unfold here, in an illogical market, of course, because anything is possible, but the logic would say that anyone who was going to buy into Bitcoin on the Bitcoin spot ETF approval news has already done so. They're not waiting for an approval to buy. They would have already bought on the anticipation that the approval is coming. And for the most part, I don't think you'll find anyone in the crypto space that is going to tell you that a Bitcoin spot ETF is not going to get approved. Even I will sit here or stand in the woods in the middle of nowhere and tell you guys that I think a Bitcoin spot ETF will be approved. The only question is when, really. Is it going to happen in January? Is there going to be another delay? I think it is an inevitability that a Bitcoin spot ETF will be approved. It's just a case of when. I think there's a high probability of January, with the anticipation and launch of a product March to June. And that will allow us to see a bit of a pullback in the market on the news, which I do think is the most likely scenario. With Bitcoin's price moving up the way it has done, specifically in the early half of the year, more specifically between January and March, volumes were very, very strong for Bitcoin. Still lower than they were in previous cycles, but still higher. And why I talk about this now is that volumes are very, very low right now and have been since March 2023, which is the majority of this year, which basically tells us that price has been moving up, not because of an increase in demand, but a decrease in the supply that is made available for purchase. That supply of which I think is going to come back to the exchanges and is likely to get sold off. What about a Bitcoin halving event then? Well, a Bitcoin halving event is pretty good news, right? Allows you to get a lot of eyeballs on Bitcoin, makes you feel like, you know, they're in a bullish market because one of these halving events happens every single cycle. Well, if you actually take a look at the historical price movements of Bitcoin in relation to the Bitcoin halving events, they haven't actually performed as you might believe, as in Bitcoin halving event occurs and you're in a bullish market, you just go up. Actually, we can see that it's actually quite inconsistent. More often than not, we have these big runs before the Bitcoin halving event, such as what we have seen here in 2023, followed by a bit of a sell the news event on the actual halving. We can see there's actually a bit of a retracement that happens when the halving event occurs. Now, I don't think this actually has a direct impact on the Bitcoin halving event itself. Ultimately, you're just halving the rewards that miners can earn, right? And you know, there's only 1.5 million left to actually be mined. It's a little bit less than that. And so we know that the halving event doesn't actually have a huge impact on the circulating supply in the same way that it did before, so we're not going to see massive imbalances with supply and demand aspects of a Bitcoin halving event like you saw back in 2011 and so forth, right? So we're not going to see those kind of real big early indications of bullish markets like we had seen previously on a Bitcoin halving event. Nonetheless, I do think it is going to be a catalyst for a pretty decent move to the upside given some time. That being said, it's just going to get some news coverage, it's going to get some eyeballs on Bitcoin, and as such, a little bit more of an increase in the demand. Ultimately, when we do get the Bitcoin spot ETF launching, that's where the true demand comes in for Bitcoin. So getting in nice and early is always a good sign. And of course, there are some other macroeconomic things that we have to be aware of as well when it comes to Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. The Federal Reserve over in the US, for example, whether the Fed do pivot is going to be a critical moment for the entire stock market and crypto markets alike. I do expect a 40% reduction in terms of the stock market, as historically that is what happens when the Fed pivots. And what I mean by a pivot, I mean a reduction in the interest rates, which sounds positive, but that only happens when the market is at its weakest, as in you start to see assets being sold off because the cost of living is just so high, and basically people need to sustain their lifestyles, so they start selling off their assets. When that happens, you see a Fed pivot, markets generally crash 40 to 50%, and obviously the larger institutional investors come in and soak up all that additional supply. The next thing you know, you're in a bullish market with retail investors left scratching their heads. What about on-chain analytics then? Well, on-chain analytics does find itself presenting some interesting data points that help back up everything I've just been talking about. And when we start taking a look at the wallets that hold Bitcoin and the number of wallets that hold Bitcoin, we end up in some interesting spots or interesting positions. And we talked about this not too long ago when I was talking about wallets that have over 1,000 Bitcoin and wallets that have over 10,000 Bitcoin. Today, I'm going to show you, and I'll put it in the background here, just so you kind of get an idea here of what's going on at the retail side, the high net worth individuals. These are retail investors. They don't, you know, have huge sums of money to invest, but they're sizable amounts. They have at least 10 Bitcoin or more. And well, it's only up 0.62% in the last 365 days. This tells us that this entire move to the upside by 2023, we've seen significant growth in the price action, has actually been a bit of a sell-off when it comes to the larger investors, the 10,000 Bitcoin or more. We've seen them heavily decrease by 8.7% in 2023. We can see that the larger investors, the 1,000 Bitcoin whales, we can also see that those guys have been selling off as well, lower now than they were before the FTX crash. And while we can see, of course, a very flat, no growth, non-existent growth for high net worth individuals as well, 10 Bitcoin or more, at 0.62% growth. That is about 300 Bitcoin, maybe a little bit more than that. No, it's not even that, it's 154 Bitcoin maybe. You'll be able to do the math just here, and I'll try to put it on the screen. I'm not sure I remember the numbers, but as you can kind of tell here, that larger investors, 10 Bitcoin or more, 100 Bitcoin or more, 1,000 Bitcoin or more, 10,000 Bitcoin or more, they haven't been buying into this idea that we have this Bitcoin spot ETF coming, and the second that we see this approval, we're going to skyrocket. If that were the case, all of these investors would be piling in during 2023 rather than offloading in 2023. And so who is it that's actually buying, and why are the volumes so insignificant? Well, it's retail investors, unfortunately. People who have less than 10 Bitcoin. People who have maybe 1 Bitcoin or more, 10% of a Bitcoin, 1% of a Bitcoin. These are size wallets that are on the growth. They're growing, right? There's a lot of significant growth to those wallets, but you don't see it when it comes to anything larger. High net worth individuals and larger investors, they haven't been buying Bitcoin, they've been selling their Bitcoin. At least that's what the on-chain data and the on-chain analytics is suggesting to us. You couple this with everything else I've spoken about in terms of a Fed pivot at the macro level, all the way through to whether we'll see a sell the news event with both the Bitcoin spot ETF and, of course, the Bitcoin halving events. It does make you wonder, and it does make you scratch your head. Are you on the right side of the trade? Is this rally that Bitcoin found itself in during 2023 about to burst? And are we going to see a 40 to 50% correction? I believe that we're going to be revisiting 30K, and if that doesn't hold, then we will be mid-20s in no time at all. Let me know what your thoughts are on all of this in the comments down below, but I'm going to leave this video right there. If you have found it useful and informative, smash the like button. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. If you haven't joined the Discord channel, why not check that out? Link is in the description below. Until the next one though, guys, have a fantastic day.